Thank you for joining us on this special webinar for Washington Policy Center, part of Washington Policy on the Go, where we have special virtual events. This one is particularly exciting because it deals with part of Washington Policy Center's mission, which is to really focus on the policy of Washington State as a whole and celebrate our now more than 1 decade in Eastern Washington. And here's how it's going to work. I'm going to bring all of our guests forward, and we'll have a discussion about what we've done, what Washington Policy Center has done in Eastern Washington, some of the major accomplishments, the inspiration for why Washington Policy Center expanded specifically for Eastern Washington. We'll talk about all those things and their implications. And then we'll open it up to questions. If you have a question at any time, however, you can enter it into the little question tool in your GoToMeeting toolbox there. It's on the right-hand side of your screen usually. There's a place to type in a question. Go ahead and enter that question at any point. You don't have to wait to the Q&A. And then when we get to the Q&A section, then I'll be sorting through those questions and asking them of our guests. It's very easy, easiest way to do it, and don't be shy. We'll try to get to all your questions. If there's any left over, we do try and answer those as well after the webinar. Right now, I'd like to bring on board our Eastern Washington Director, Chris Cargill, he's been the spearhead of Washington Policy Center in Eastern Washington. He's really the face of the organization in many ways, and voice, actually. He's on the radio so often there. Welcome, Chris. Welcome to this. This is basically a celebration in a way of your work.
Well, thanks very much, Dave, and good afternoon to everybody watching across the state. We really couldn't be here to the point where we are in our 10th year. 2020 is our 10th year in Eastern Washington. We couldn't be here without everyone's support. And I particularly want to thank everyone who has been with us since the very beginning. Earlier this year, we put together a list of everyone who's been with us since the end of 2009 when we kicked off this effort. And that list numbered about 125, 130 people. So the fact that we have those people with us and are still with us more than 10 years later is really remarkable. We should also note this. When we started off this endeavor in Eastern Washington, we had, as I mentioned, about 130, 140 supporters in that ballpark. Today, we have upwards of 1,300 supporters throughout Eastern Washington, which is really just remarkable. I think it's a testament to the work that WPC does throughout the state. And I really think that it shows that the decision our board of directors made at that time, back in the late 2000s, to expand into Eastern Washington and make sure we had a full-time Eastern Washington presence was a pretty good decision. And we're going to talk more about that this afternoon. So, Dave, if you'll allow me.
Let me interrupt you real briefly there, Chris, because one of the things that excites me about that number, and it is great and it's celebrated, I'm sure we'll talk more about it, but it's also exciting because there's so much room to grow, where it really is remarkable. But when you think of all the people still on the sidelines, many people kind of, it's easy to get into kind of a feeling of despair about Washington State, but then you think, you know what, the more people get off the sidelines and focus on policy, because you look at where policy is in the state, where frequently, look at the ballot advisory, for example, votes where people are basically saying that we want lower taxes and we want kind of market-based reforms, and they reject income taxes and other things. So there's some exciting opportunities there. But I interrupted. Why don't
definitely? And let me just add on to that, Dave. I think you're exactly right, and we saw it again after this last election, where people are upset about what the election results show. They really wanted one candidate or another, but I will tell you, when it comes to the issues like charter schools or banning an income tax or all of the different things that WPC advocates for, supports, that has the research to back those up, the people of our state, by and large, are with us on those recommendations and on those policies. And I think, to your point, that really proves that we're on the right track, but we also could do a lot more, and there's a lot to be excited about.
Speaking of a lot to be excited about, why don't we bring forward our next guests, our guests that have been instrumental in WC's progress in Eastern Washington. Chris, why don't you introduce them?
Yeah, so Kevin Boucher is a former Yakima County Commissioner and joined our board a couple of years ago after he got out of the elected official business. We were so excited to have Kevin as another Yakima voice joining our board. He's now on our board of directors statewide and is the incoming vice chair for WPC. I also want to welcome in Heidi Stanley, who is our current vice chair, also on our board at WPC. She is the CEO of and the chairman of Empire Bolt in Spokane. And the Stanleys, Ron and Heidi Stanley, and Ron's father as well, have just been tremendous supporters to WPC. We really couldn't do the work that we do in Spokane without them. And I also want to bring on Wayne Williams. Wayne is the former CEO of Telect in Eastern Washington. I tell you, the Williams family as well in Eastern Washington, and particularly the Spokane, Liberty Lake areas, have just been critical. Wayne is a former member of our board. His mother, Judy Williams, is a former member of our board. We have 3 generations of Williamses that are involved in WPC. So to Kevin, to Wayne, to Heidi, I think we're bringing on Heidi as well. We were having a little bit of troubles with her video a couple of minutes ago, but I'm sure she'll join us here in a couple of minutes. But to Kevin, to Wayne, to Heidi, thank you for being here. Really do appreciate it. And I'll let Dave take it away.
Sure. Well, why don't we start? And it's going to kind of be a roundtable discussion. So feel free to pop in, and there'll be a little overlap, but that's just the nature of these these Zoom meetings. Why don't we start with the outlook for Eastern Washington? What was it? Was there a trigger event that just made you decide that Washington Policy Center needed to establish itself in Eastern Washington and really focus on that part of the state, or was it more just a gradual and natural evolution?
Wayne, do you want to take that one first, since I think you were involved in those decisions?
The initial one, yeah. I was wondering how this was going to work, but yeah, welcome to the West Siders, to the other East Side on this call, not the one that's the closest to you, but I think that the impetus was Chris was looking for a job. Honestly, no, it was not. But it was exciting. It was an exciting opportunity. I think that Dan and the board and that recognized that there was another East Side, and we were getting a lot of traction. Chris coming on board was tremendous, and we needed a face and boots on the street. It's really easy for Washington State, as large as it is, to kind of forget the entire corridor down the Idaho and along the Oregon border, including Central Washington. And everybody said they wanted to do it, but they horizon flight in and back out. And I think this was, for me, Washington Policy Center was the first organization that I've been involved with clear back to the 90s that actually put somebody here to get out on the road and go meet the constituents that cared about clear and accurate research, and even for an organization. So it was an exciting opportunity to be involved with that in the beginning.
Let me ask, what do you think the differences or what do you think it is about Eastern Washington that Western Washingtonians need to know, or what do you think it is about Eastern Washington that an organization like Washington Policy Center should know and relate to when it comes to dealing with Eastern Washington? What makes it different?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, let's start with you, Heidi.
Okay. I'll just kind of pop in and echo. I want to echo before I answer your question, if that's okay, David, a comment that Wayne made. And one of the things that I focused on as I started to become more involved in the organization is having an Eastern Washington office really gives us credibility. And, you can call it boots on the ground, whatever you want, that Wayne mentioned, but it really gives us credibility. Therefore, and this leads to answering your other question, which is the differences. The policy issues may not be as different as you think in terms of Eastern Washington and Western Washington. There's lots of places where we cross and where we meet up and where we have similar issues. However, for those issues that are really central, either in Central Washington or in Eastern Washington, having focus on the facts and having focus on policy and being able to make the connections one-on-one, day by day, is beneficial. And you can't just sit in Seattle and say that we are a statewide policy network if you don't have people on the ground doing the real work of the policy center. So I would say it has to do a lot with credibility. It has to do a lot with similar issues, but meeting someplace in the middle to make sure that Eastern Washington does have a say in where our state's going.
Yeah, just to add on to that, I think in Eastern Washington, many individuals share the philosophies that the Policy Center researches and puts forth. And we now have an opportunity to really expand. Our 1,300 is a great number of individuals that are supporting the Policy Center from Eastern Washington. I'd like to see that tenfold, quite frankly. And I really think it is achievable, a significant number increase given things that are happening in downtown Seattle and other policies that we see, many of us see as heading the wrong direction within the state. So we have an opportunity here in Eastern Washington. Many of us with like minds that we can have develop more influence throughout this side of the state and the western side of the state. So I think we're an important component. And coming from agriculture, it was always I've spent my life in agriculture and spent a significant amount of time in Olympia. And, just there's those on the western side of the state that just don't even sometimes forget that we exist. East side is Aquar, east side is Bellevue for many of those folks. So I think it's really incumbent that we have this opportunity to have an Eastern Washington office, to have Chris and other staff that are reside in Eastern Washington, so that we can continue the overall mission for the overall state, because we are one state. When it comes right down to it, we're one state, and we've got to be all working together with our west side friends as well as our many east side friends. So we're fortunate to have this organization here and having a boots on the ground and a presence this last decade.
Dave, maybe if I can jump in real quick. I think everyone on the call today has a WPC story. And what I mean by that is how they came to find out about the organization, how they got involved in the organization. Some people will say it was the annual dinner that I attended in Spokane, and I got to hear from Charles Krauthammer, I got to hear from Jim Mattis. And some other people will say, I attended one of those 7 a.m. morning breakfast events in Wenatchee or Yakima, and ever since then I was hooked. So maybe Kevin and Wayne and Heidi, you can kind of tell us your WPC story, and I would invite other people on the call as well to chime in with how they got involved in the organization. So Heidi, do you want to start us off?
Sure. My introduction was actually reaching out to the organization for help. I needed some facts. I needed some information on some business policy things that I was working on for my employer at the time. And so it really started with a knock on the door to say, I don't know where to go, but I heard that you're doing some research in this area. Then the next was a visit from Washington Policy Center, and of course you would expect that. So a visit, and it was primarily, frankly, a visit to ask for funding and to further expand on the mission of what Washington Policy Center was trying to get done. But someplace in between there, it became more than just asking for money. It really became the realization that this is an organization who really has the everything they need to be successful, and I wanted to be a part of it. And so, frankly, that's where I started on the history or the progression of my involvement. But it was the Eastern Washington office came after I had become interested in the organization and interested in what the organization was doing. Fulfilling that dream really, to me, gave the organization, as I mentioned earlier, credibility. That they were real. They were not just here with a suitcase getting ready to get on an airplane to fly back to Seattle. And that's when I joined the advisory board, Eastern Washington Advisory Board. That lots of people that I had no idea had the same thinking that I had. and then I've had the opportunity to join the board over the last several years, and that has been a great experience also. So that's how it all started. And I do believe that this organization in Eastern Washington, but the organization as a whole, has great opportunities as we move forward to continue to grow and serve the state appropriately.
Wayne, you want to go next?
Yeah, Chris mentioned that my mom was on the board for a bit, and I think from running a business, there was research always around my desk. So I would just say that the materials and that were there, and I'm a big proponent, kind of a data junkie, so I tend to read lots of information. And I also was running businesses in other locations outside of Washington State, so you kind of knew whether it was workman's comp or schools or taxes or that kind of stuff. You kind of knew a little bit about the disparate differences, if you would, between Washington State and elsewhere. So that kind of got me introduced to it a little bit, and I think that at the opportunity for me to join the board, that was an exciting opportunity. I was on the Eastern Washington Advisory Board in the beginning. I think the thing that I appreciate most about the Policy Center, if I just state it with the research and the data, it's unlike a ballot or a voter's pamphlet or a referendum or something that where you can't even get through in the first paragraph or two, get through really what they're trying to say, and so you're always questioning whether you're voting yes or no or supporting something or not. You can't break that down. So I like the data. If people got more involved in it, they started reading the information quickly, they're captivated within the first couple paragraphs of what this is and the clarity of it. And then if you want to get deeper, you can go deeper. So that's kind of was I think the exciting time was that they listened. That was they're out there with the feet on the street. Chris coming on board was great. I think the time that I was the most excited was that they do listen to the constituents. Heidi mentioned she was talking to them and they're coming out there. It's demonstrated. When we were trying to decide to go, whether we're going to go to the Hyatt in Bellevue for an event one time, and Chris was there and there was a few of us there, and I said, well, we should just need to simul broadcast this back to Spokane. So we went to the Lincoln Center that year, and it started out really small. I can't remember if we had like 180 or 240 people in this simulcast, but it was a technology shift and a change, and it was done way before really I would even say before the tech was set up to do it. And so that listening to their board, listening to the advisory board, listening to the individuals out there that are trying to improve a free market in a big way is really was what has continued to keep my wife and I involved in it, even past my service as a board member with it. But it's been exciting to participate, and I think 10 years crept up very fast. I think.
What about you, Kevin? How do you get on board?
Yeah, it's about it must have been timed with maybe the opening of the Eastern Washington office, but it's been about 10 years. And my wife, Renee, and I, we were invited to attend a reception in Yakima to hear about this organization that I was not familiar with before, this Washington Policy Center. And said, well, we wanted to come and listen. And Chris, you were probably there at the time, and I believe Dan had been as well. But both Renee and I were listening to the presentation, and as we're listening to the various things that the different centers and what they were working on, we both looked at each other and kind of winked. And as we left that reception, I go, these are our people. I mean, this is we've been waiting for an organization like this, because really, yes, there were some ag organizations working on some things that we'd been involved in for years, but this was all encompassing. This was dealing with the many facets that this organization does today with the different centers. And that was what we were both just fell in love with the organization at that time, and have been staunch supporters ever since then. And so it really gives just that opportunity to get some good information. Being an average individual out there, the media, even back 10 years ago, the media was not, giving us very accurate information or detail on specific subjects that pertain to the citizens and businesses of Washington. And this organization, you were rocking then, and you're rocking today as far as touching on those key issues and providing that true research that cuts to the core and cuts out the BS that we see coming from other sources. So that was our introduction 10 years ago, and it's that was the best thing that could have ever happened for us, being invited to that reception.
It's interesting, Dave, because Wayne mentioned the first simulcast annual dinner that we did in Eastern Washington. Yes, I think you're right, Wayne. I think the number was 180, 185, somewhere in there. And then most people on the call know today, that number is about 1,200, 11 to 1,200 people who regularly attend our Eastern Washington dinner, and on the west side, same number on the west side. And quite frankly, we can't go any higher than that unless we start, unless we go into some big airplane hangar somewhere. I mean, we're basically maxed out, which is simply remarkable. And I think a lot of the people outside of the five of us, a lot of the people who came on to WPC, started supporting WPC, did so as a result of one of those events. They attended one of those events and they said, wow, this is incredible. I loved hearing from, Senator so-and-so or this national analyst, but even more so, I love the work that WPC is doing, and I want to be involved and I want to support it. And now that dinner event, thanks to Wayne, Kevin, Heidi, and everyone who's on the call today as well, filling more tables, inviting more guests. That dinner event is one of the best events of the year, and it is a can't miss event for not only our local supporters, but also national leaders who want to attend and want to be involved in what WPC has to offer.
I don't want to give our development team a heart attack or anything, but it sounds like you're recommending we start a simulcast perhaps in the Tri-Cities area so that we can build up something there as well and get a three-peat going. I know it's been 10 years. There's a lot of excitement, a lot of excitement about Washington Policy Center's work and what we've accomplished. But try to narrow it down to one thing that sticks out since Washington Policy Center started focusing on the East Side. What's the one thing that most sticks out for you about an accomplishment of Washington Policy Center, whether it's stopping something or building something or inspiring something? What is that one thing that jumps out? We'll start with you again, Heidi.
Oh, I hate it when people just say I can only have one.
And don't cheat. Don't say, well, here's my top four.
Okay, well, yeah. Okay, so Chris has talked about the annual dinner, so I'm not going to piggyback on that. I mean, that is a true accomplishment. I would say what just jumped in my head first was the opening of the Ag Research Center, and not only what they've been able to accomplish up to this point and the respect that they have among those who have an interest in that area of policy, but where they can go. I mean, I think that is a center that will grow. I think it is of utmost importance, no matter where you are in the state, but of course, Eastern and Central Washington. And it ties into so many other policy issues that we deal with, whether it has transportation to market, whether it has, it ties into so many other of our center's work. That would be my one. But if we go around again, I have another one. So
let's go. Well, we'll see if the other one gets covered. That's the key.
Okay.
Kevin?
Dave, before we go to Wayne and Kevin, I'd be interested to know from the people also participating in the call today, instead of the five of us as well, to know what they think our number one accomplishment has been. And we will give license to the people participating that you can list more than one if you want. Well, you can cheat, as Dave says. We'll keep it to one, but you give us your maybe top three.
So, well, I'll go next here. I think in the recent year, 18 months, I think it's the policy centers calling out the state income tax issue. Again, and the capital gains, the capital gains taxes from some of our political elected leaders is not an income tax. I think Jason has done a great job in Jason Mercier and the research he's brought forward and the time he spent talking to the other 49 states and really calling to task that our state of Washington, because that issue is not going to go away, and that issue is going to be on the forefront come January in this virtual legislative session. They're still finding ways to tax us, and I think that what this organization continues to do on that item is just of great value to all the taxpayers of this state. And I've got one more too, and we go around the horn.
I should add, we've got charter schools and advocating for choice in education up, and those aren't bad either. Wayne?
No. I'm going to use the word, it can be controversial this time, but it's sustainable. Washington Policy Center has demonstrated sustainability. And I had an executive coach, John Townsend, was with me one time. For those that don't know me, a few of you do on this call, Heidi and Chris especially, but I'm an Enneagram 7, so that's an enthusiast. So I can really participate in a lot of things. But when you're looking for something that's out there, he was sharing with me, gave me 3 words. You got to do things that you're passionate about, passionate about, passionate about. And I go, well, I'm passionate about a lot of things. And he goes, no, because passion, whatever you pick and in your passion, it has to be sustainable. And so that word hit me really hard because in my time with the Policy Center, it has not had, while it can have hiccups and it can have struggles in that from maybe dollars dropping off and not meeting all the objectives there, the work has been sustainable and the team has been sustainable. The fact that Chris, we're celebrating him still being part of the Eastern Washington Center and a part of the strategy for Washington Policy Center in Eastern Washington for a decade is kind of demonstrates the work that is going on and ongoing. And I think that there's always material. There's always fodder. We're just talking about that now, that the state, the people inside of concrete houses are making decisions all the time and not thinking about what the work that's going on that needs to be, the voices on the street need to be heard. So that's the kind of the one word I came up with. You could say sustainably passionate, right? Or something like that. But anyway, it's sustainability.
Chris, as Eastern Washington Director, do you have something that stands out to you as, that surprising moment where you feel like you just landed on the map?
Yeah, and I'm having troubles like everyone else. I'm having troubles limiting it to one. And it's not necessarily, obviously we have internal accomplishments. We try to get a certain amount of people to the events, or we try to meet fundraising goals, that Wayne and Heidi kind of touched on. But I think for me, it's the policies that matter. And I think probably one or two of the ones that I was particularly proud of as an organization, not just Eastern Washington, but as an organization, is the charter school issue that was previously mentioned by Ann on the questions that are coming in here, but also remote testimony in the legislature, allowing people in Eastern Washington to be part of the legislative session. I mean, sometimes it takes us 5, 6, 7 hours to get to Olympia in the dead of winter. Very difficult sometimes to get over the pass. And yet for years, in a state that was home to Microsoft, we wouldn't allow people to do remote testimony. Now look what we're doing. Everyone is doing Zoom. Everyone's doing GoToMeeting. Everyone's doing all these different platforms. Well, this is what the legislature should have been doing, quite frankly, 10 years ago, at least, allowing people the opportunity to testify before the legislature without making the long travel and distance to Olympia. It's good for them, good for the legislature, good for the environment, good for public safety because it keeps people off of a snowy, icy road. All these different things are really important. I will also mention one other thing. We had a comment on here from Patricia talking about the income tax issue, and I think Kevin mentioned it as well. We really have been the leading force behind making sure that Washington State maintains its income tax-free status.
Froze up.
I mean, we've got the situation going on in Seattle where they're trying to put in income taxes. But what we've done in the past is say, let's do Seattle opposite. Let's do what the people of the state have demanded, quite frankly, more than 10 times, and that is put into our Constitution a ban on an income tax. It's what the people of our state want. And then in the last year, you saw the city of Spokane, the second largest city in the state, say, you know what? We're going to follow this recommendation and put that into our city charter, which in essence is the city constitution in Spokane. So I know other cities are considering this, other counties are considering this as well. But I think probably those two items and a whole host of others are really our top accomplishments.
Now, just to show the unity between East and West, my grandparents were from the Yakima area, but we also, on the west side, it might take 5-6 hours to get to Olympia, and that's just from Everett because of horrible traffic and a dangerous underpass we have to get through in Seattle, where the traffic in the most populated area, the lanes go down to 1. So a lot of craziness abounds. Couldn't agree more on the remote testimony issue. But there's also been some smaller kind of micro targeted events that I thought were impressive from Washington Policy Center, like Chris, you and Maria Frost, our director for our Cole Center for Transportation, you exposed big problems with the Ben Franklin transit system recently. And would that have happened without a WPC Eastern Washington office?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And for people who don't know, Ben Franklin Transit is the Tri-Cities Transit Agency. So Spokane has Spokane Transit Authority. Ben Franklin Transit's in the Tri-Cities. In Seattle, you have Metro and the different transit agencies that are over there as well in the different cities, Everett's as well as down south. But to your point, Dave, Maria has done some terrific work on exposing the spending and, quite frankly, the reduction in ridership in these agencies. And so I think taxpayers always want to know, A, am I getting what I paid for? And then B, is it working? And if we know those two things, and it's being accomplished in the way that was promised by elected officials at the time, most people say, okay, yes, I don't mind paying my taxes to know that it's going toward this, it's working, it's doing what it was supposed to accomplish. Well, we've seen the exact opposite in some transit agencies, where the amount of money going into some of these transit agencies is going up, while the amount of people using these transit agencies is going down. So people kind of, they question that in their mind. Why is that the case? And Maria has done some terrific work on Ben Franklin Transit. We've also done work as an organization on the different transit agencies that I previously mentioned, all to say, not to say that we don't transit, public transit, we certainly do, but are there more efficient ways we can operate it, and are the people getting what they paid for? And anybody who wants to read that analysis or the other pieces that Maria has done, of course, can jump onto our website. It's all there.
It's easy for people on the west side to forget that Spokane's our second biggest city, and Washington Policy Center had a big impact this year in Spokane with WPC recommendations showing up on the ballot, and the people of Spokane, which is, a lot of people on the west side think Eastern Washington is, super conservative, but Spokane's, it's a swing city, really. It leans left. It's got some of the leaders the leader of the Democrats in the Senate is from Spokane. Leadership in the House is also from Spokane, Democrat majority. So, and yet we had 2 WPC recommendations passed with over 70%, and significantly, which is just incredible. How do you see WPC's influence expanding, and is there any place to go next in Spokane? Where do you go next after achievements like that? Now that's open to everybody.
Yeah, and I can I'll start and then turn it over to Heidi and Wayne especially. I think you're exactly right, Dave. Spokane is not a conservative city. Maybe 20, 30 years ago, it used to be a conservative city. It is no longer a conservative city. It voted for Joe Biden in this recent election. It voted for Hillary Clinton in the 2016 election. It has voted consistently in a more liberal direction. And the fact that those two issues that you mentioned, the income tax ban and the collective bargaining open negotiations, so taxpayers have a right to know what's happening in those negotiations. The fact that those passed in every precinct of the city with more than 70% support and almost 80% support for the collective bargaining issue, I think shows you that when it comes to policies, when it comes to the issues, the people of the state are behind what WPC is offering and the research that we're putting forward. You can have an argument about politicians on both the left and the right about whether they're doing the right thing or the wrong thing, but when it comes to the issues, the people of the state and of our cities support a free market stance.
And Chris, I think to pick that up, or to carry that forward, simply Washington Policy Center policies and issues that they spend time doing research on. As you read them, you truly get a sense that your opinion is respected, but they respect your intellect as a reader. So the reason you have 70% affirmative votes and that kind of thing is because the work that Washington Policy Center does is so thorough and it hits right dead nail in your heart and to the issue, to what the issues are. And that's important. And one of the things that drew me early on to this organization was their respect for your intellect. You read the facts, and then you as an individual make your own decision as to how you're going to respond to it. And that's why when it comes to on the policy side of things, taking personalities and individual offices that are being voted for, when you just look at the policy issues and you explain to the citizenry what you're trying to accomplish by the opinions that you're putting out there, it's easy for them to make a decision. So respecting your intellect is key to me, and nothing else I read, whether it's a newspaper or anything else, really respects my intellect to make a decision based on the facts. They always want to feed it to me.
I think Heidi makes a good point as far as the information that the Policy Center assembles, researches, and disseminates. It brings it down to a level that individuals can understand. And one thing I have noticed, personal observation in recent election cycles, is that on tax issues, sometimes compared to philosophical issues, individuals in this state that tend to lean left on philosophical issues, when it comes down to their own pocketbook, then when it affects them directly, they think twice about taxing issues. And I think that's a key role that this organization has played in recent election cycles on some of these items, is explaining it, the real effects. It's always easy to say, well, we're going to tax someone else. It's okay if you pay for it, but if I have to pay for it, I think differently. And so I think that's just been a key thing that this organization has done on a number of issues, is bring it down to a level that's real, accurate, and that people can understand. And it is really an important thing, because we're not getting that information out of the major media sources.
And Kevin provides an interesting commentary because he's a recovering politician, so he can really tell us about this kind of stuff and what the citizenry is thinking.
Yeah.
Okay, before we move on, anyone want to add anything else?
I think the only thing that I would share is, I think that the Policy Center, we're at a right time. That growth that was brought up earlier when Kevin shared, he said, I think we could go 10 times this number, Eastern Washington too. We're getting more and more people moving out of the urban core right now, and they're not necessarily people that are not free market people. Most of the people I'm meeting frequently from here all the way into northern Idaho, into Missoula, and that are people moving out of urban core that are free market believers, and I state that not whether it's conservative or liberal, on the social side of the issue. I also believe that next generation right now is really ripe to more information, and it's not information that I would say is politicized. It's not either going on a Republican side or a Democrat side. It's really core, strong research. And I'm interfacing a lot with some of the younger entrepreneurs in that too, that today are, for the first time, even in the course of this last election, that are looking to step in and speak up against the income tax. Actually, I was talking to my son the other day, and he said, I just want a box I can check to pick where I want my taxes to go, instead of, so it's more of the a la carte thing. So you're starting to see the same question we were having on, Microsoft. Chris mentioned, that we couldn't do remote testimony, and Microsoft's right here. We are at this right opportunity where we can do events that are both live and video at the same time. We can deliver materials in new fashions and new ways, and people are searching for real, clear data. And I'm not even calling it news, just clear data that's out there. And I think that there's a great opportunity. I think this corridor from Cle Elum all the way to Cody, Wyoming, this whole central corridor is just opening up for more and more people looking for free markets. And today, we're not looking to have people have to move to Spokane to take a job at a location here or in Yakima or Tri-Cities. They could choose to work here now and work for someone else that's in Florida or Seattle or California and live. And those are the people that we want in this area. So.
Yeah, it's really an interesting time right now, Dave, because I think Wayne's exactly right. We have a great opportunity to be able to reach more people with doing these type of video conference events or Facebook Live events or anything else that takes advantage of technology. I will say that I heard one person joke a couple of weeks ago that they have never in their life so craved a rubber chicken dinner than they do now, being able to get out there and see people. And so, look, eventually we'll get there. But even when we get back to be able to do in-person events, I think that the technology component is still going to be critical. One of the things Brian says on the chat is, thank you for bringing so many cosmic leaders from close and far away to inspire our community. Leaders deliver hope, and you and your speakers have done just that. So obviously, I think Brian's talking about some of the big events that we've done, the annual dinner events. One of my favorite memories and favorite speakers at the annual dinner was Dr. Charles Krauthammer and Governor Chris Christie. I don't know what Kevin, Wayne, and Heidi would say about their favorite speakers, but it'd be interesting to hear their note, and maybe everyone else who's on the call as well. Who was your favorite Eastern Washington annual dinner speaker? And then maybe you have a suggestion for next year.
Well, I'm a Krauthammer fan. Just like you, and I thought he did a great job. I'm trying to think, and then former General Mattis was just it was the right message at the right time when he came and spoke. So I kind of felt like those were my two favorite speakers.
I'm not going to disagree there. I do want to dovetail on what Chris brought this subject up and what Wayne said earlier on sustainability. And this organization is only sustainable with its supporters. And 2020 has been challenging for all of us. And this organization, we literally had to cancel every beginning of March and thereafter every physical event that we had, including a Yakima reception and clear up to our Spokane and Bellevue dinners. And as a board, we were quite concerned on that sustainability component, how we were going to do financially this year. And on behalf of myself and the rest of the board, I want to thank everyone for their support. We're doing fine. The virtual dinner was a huge success, and our supporters have just stepped up and have done so it really shows, in my mind, the value of this organization, individuals. Even with kind of some of the challenging times, businesses, it's been tough for business, but people have stepped up and kept their commitments this year. And for some have even gone a step further. So I want to get that in before this time is over. This organization is sustainable, it's strong, and it's strong because of the support we've had from our supporters. So thank you.
Because of the nature of
Chris,
the oh, go ahead, Heidi.
Oh no, I was just going to indicate that celebrating the power, what we call the power of the free market system, is really what the annual dinner is about. So when you look at the speakers, whichever is your favorite, and at different times you have different favorites, but going forward, as we look forward to next year's dinner and the dinner after that and the dinner after that, it's just real important that the organization, as well as the participants, the donors, and the supporters that we have that have been so critical to our growth, recognize that that's really the main purpose of that event. Yes, you do raise funding, which is an important tool that we need to accomplish our mission, but we really are celebrating the free market system and how it works and where it's going, and we never want to lose sight of that piece of our mission and what we do, why we're here.
We still have about 10 minutes left, so we'll have some time for additional questions. The nature of this discussion has really been the kind where people might comment more than question, and I want to go through a few of those comments before we could do another round of questioning here. I also want to remind viewers that coming up on December 8th, we'll have a roundtable discussion with Paul Guppy, our Vice President of Research, Jason Mercier, our Center for Government Reform Director, and Dr. Roger Stark, our Healthcare Policy Analyst. So that'll be an exciting discussion talking about the implications of the upcoming legislative session, some policy advances. So be sure to mark your calendars for December 8th and always check our website for the next upcoming event. And we're having more and more of them. Chris is doing Facebook Live events for Free Markets Destroy, which, even though they're targeted to a younger crowd, they're still of interest to everybody else. So I want to share a few of the comments that we've received so far and then get to another question. This from Judy Williams, just a quick comment. I was recruited by Emilio Cantu, who was a state senator. This was back in the 90s. I remember the senator. Let's see, Ann Coles says charter schools and advocating for choice in education are key accomplishments. Other great achievements are the college clubs, YP program, and the Free Market Create initiative, which Chris is the director of. And let's see, Patricia Byers, we alluded to this earlier, says, I'd list the significant work is the agricultural support and research, the state income tax issue, and the new video promotion on Capitalism Destroys. That's the Free Markets Destroy program. And she also says, my first experience with WPC was when Chris came to Yakima's Chamber of Commerce for a couple of lunches. I learned a great deal from him. Then I returned from my business and began to get involved in local politics. Last year, I ran for city council, was elected, then appointed mayor. That is when I first became a member, I think. I really appreciate all the work WPC does. I will be continuing. Great work, thank you. And I think that's one of the great success stories right there, is WPC research inspiring active citizens to just get involved. Is that the kind of story that you hear more and more of on the east side? I know we hear it on the west.
Yeah, I certainly hear those type of stories all the time. Former state senator Michael Baumgartner, who's now the treasurer of Spokane County, once told me that when he was going door to door, knocking on doors, asking for votes, he had a WPC policy guide with him while he was doing that, and talking about the different issues that he wanted to address. And people responded to that. He won his election, served in the state Senate for many years, and now he's back here as the treasurer of Spokane County. So, I mean, we hear these type of issues, or these type of circumstances and these type of successes all the time, where, people, as Patricia said, they start off by just attending a breakfast or a lunch. They hear a little bit more about the organization, and then a year later, they're all in. And as Kevin indicated, we could not do the work that we do without those people and everyone else who's been with us for so many years. So I want to reiterate that how grateful I am to our great supporters in Eastern Washington, no matter where in Eastern Washington you are. I know a lot of concentration on the west side of the state is on Seattle. I want to make sure one of our primary goals is to make sure that when we're talking about Eastern Washington, we're talking about all of Eastern Washington, not just one city or one area.
An interesting question we have here, and I know we've talked about notable achievements and big achievements, but what's the one notable policy issue, other than agriculture is it's too broad, but something specific, a notable policy issue that Washington Policy Center has been able to bring to the forefront that Western Washington typically ignores. Something where WPC was able to kind of take something from the east side and force the west to reckon with it. Any thoughts?
Well, I think the Snake River Dam issue, for one, I think that has been a key issue that the Policy Center has engaged in because it does affect the entire state. Many people in the West probably don't think so, but it certainly does. I think it's those kinds of issues that we address that help bring Eastern Washington, major Eastern Washington issues to light. So that's one that comes to mind, just jumped right out to me, was the Snake River Dam issue.
It's amazing how many times the Snake River Dam information video has been viewed and repurposed, shown. It seems like Todd has the labor of Sisyphus, trying to argue the point for the Snake River Dams. It seems like every time that debate's won, it's brought back up again.
I was just going to mention, Dave, I agree. I think the Snake River Dams one is a huge one. I mean, we did a poll. You put together a poll that we did about a year ago at this time, where we asked people a bunch of questions about the Snake River Dams. One of the most simple questions is, how many Snake River Dams are there? And so, and it was shocking, at least to me, that no one really knew the answer to it. The answers were all over the map. And yet we continue to hear a drumbeat from some activists that, oh, we just need to get rid of all the dams in Washington State because of the fish issue. And Todd Moore's research and others as well have pointed out that the dams are not the problem when we're talking about salmon runs and other fish issues that are going on. And what's really remarkable is, in a state that is as environmentally conscious as Washington is, you would think that as a state, we would want to have carbon-free electricity being produced. And yet it seems as if now some of the activists and some other voices are saying, well, let's at the same time get rid of the Snake River dams and other hydroelectric facilities in the state, but we need more carbon-free electricity. I mean, it's hard to see both issues there.
We
well,
have
Chris,
a little,
that's why we talk about, or you ask the question, what's next? What's going to be the next big thing? Well, there will be big things that come along, but we're going to be fighting the dams forever. I mean, that will be something that continues. So much of what we work on, it doesn't stop just because you produce the paper, the white paper. It in many ways, it's just the beginning, because the facts get out and then people talk, and then you can have the opportunity to have dialogue, particularly with the legislative branch. But I look at it as there's a whole bunch of housekeeping, probably the wrong word, that has to continually take place with what we've already created, with the policies and the issue stands that we've already taken. Income tax is not going to go away. The group that is behind it is not going away. And same thing with the dams, same thing with some of the transportation issues we're dealing with. So much of our work is continuing to slog through and make sure that we continue to have out in front of people the facts, and add to them as we have information and as we have data. And I don't know what the next big thing is, but I look forward to participating in it. And you can be assured that the value, it'll prove itself out just by the value that it provides as we move forward.
Dave, if I can mention one more thing. Tom Power mentions the collective bargaining issue in the chat. And yeah, the open collective bargaining issue is a huge issue. And I just want to reiterate, it's not WPC that's running ballot measures or going out there and having the boots on the ground, so to speak, to get some of these issues across the finish line. Yes, they are ideas and research that we've certainly studied, but it's groups like Better Spokane that put the ballot measure forward last year on the income tax and the collective bargaining issue. They're the ones who did the groundwork. on that particular issue. It's other statewide groups as well that are putting ballot measures forward based on certain ideas or recommendations. So we are a piece of the puzzle, certainly, but a lot of other groups get a lot of credit as well.
Yeah, as a 501c3, we can fight the battle of ideas, but not the battle of the ballot box or things like that. So, but it is nice to see people, be inspired by good ideas, and then get together with fellow citizens and create organizations and achieve a better community through it. And Heidi brings up a good point too, which is, we look around, we see this with free markets create. There's all kinds of really, really bad ideologies out there that have been proven woefully awful. I mean, even, with communism, we had, hundreds of millions of people die, and yet that ideology is not dead. And I think as people right of center or free market, we look at really bad policy ideas and think, why doesn't that thing die? It's been proven wrong. But if big ideas that are so awful don't die, we shouldn't expect the smaller ones to die off either. It's just we just have to resign ourselves to a never-ending struggle for better policy and to improve lives through free market solutions. We're just about out of time. We've got about 90 seconds left. Any closing remarks? Anything you want to leave people thinking of when it comes to Washington Policy Center's decade in Eastern Washington? We'll just go around the window here. We'll start with you, Heidi. I think we lost Heidi's volume there.
Okay,
Wayne?
there we go.
Oh, there we go. Okay.
I'm doing this by phone. I am not very, you'd think after all these months I'd be more technically savvy. I said the future looks bright for the Eastern Washington Policy Center and all of the Washington Policy Center. I think now more than ever, credible, factual data needs to be out there for people to decide which side of the fence they want to be on as it relates to issues that impact the state.
Wayne?
Well, I'm excited about 2030. That's like a decade from now. I think there's going to be a lot of work. I think that the challenge we've gone on, that we're experiencing right now, the Policy Center is, by even not having the events and that, I think we're going to see not just probably remote testimony, we're going to see available space where we're probably going to see legislatures, people meeting in different areas around the state from now on. So there's going to be a lot more, I think, understanding, a lot more opportunity to connect citizens of Washington State with their representatives in ways. And I'm hopeful that there's going to be more inspired people to come out with the work that, as Chris mentioned about Michael Baumgartner, just carrying a policy guide in their hand and running for office that can help us protect and actually grow risk preference in a free market society instead of risk aversion. So I'm excited about this next decade.
To move ideas forth that this organization focus on it, it's a numbers game. It's going to be persistence. It's going to take the continued work of our staff, great work. But for everyone on the phone and all our rest of our members, it's really up to us to get the numbers up. Really, it's up to all of us to spread the word of the Policy Center, forward information. We all get these information and links. So we're going to get back hopefully very soon to meeting in person again and inviting people to events. And a decade from now, Wayne, I'm hoping we're at that 13,000 number. But it's going to really take all of us to really make that happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I wrote down 13,000 when Kevin made that goal earlier. So I will just say really quickly, because we got to get to work if we're going to hit that 13,000 number. I would just say really quickly a thank you to Kevin, to Wayne, to Heidi, to everyone who's on the call today. As I mentioned earlier, the key to our success is not me. It's Kevin, Wayne, Heidi, and everyone else who's participating today, going out to their community, going out to their friends, their colleagues, their neighbors, saying, hey, did you know about WPC? Did you read this study on this particular issue? That's what's really going to be driving our success for the next decade. So thank you to everyone for being involved. For those of you who haven't yet supported us this year, I hope you'll consider doing so. in the coming weeks before the end of the year. And a big thank you to everyone in our first 10 years.
Yes, thanks to all of you today for participating as well. You can see on your screen how to become a member of Washington Policy Center. There'll be a link in the chat right there that you can click to if you feel inspired and want to become a member, or, and this is important, if you know somebody who should be a member. You know, a lot of people are members, you know, but you know somebody who believes the way you do, who has been inspired by the research you've told them about, but they're not yet members. Be sure to share that with them and remind them. You know, we're a 501c3, donations are tax deductible, and there's all kinds of ways to become a member and levels, and we appreciate each and every one of you. Also, in the link section there in the chat screen, you can register now for next Tuesday's event. Again, that'll be a roundtable discussion with our Vice President of Research, Paul Guppy, our Center for Government Reform Director and Budget Guru of Washington State, Jason Mercier, and Dr. Roger Stark. So that's going to be an exciting event next Tuesday as well. Thanks again for joining us in this celebration of Washington Policy Center's 10 years plus now, 10 years plus in Eastern Washington. We look forward to seeing you again next week. Thanks, everybody.